Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And my guest today is Dawn Brunke, and it is not the first time that she has been my guest. So I am extra excited. Hello, Dawn.
Hi, Anna. I'm excited to talk with you too.
Well, you know, I read books and then I reread them. And when I reread them, there are things that kind of come together in my mind. And the reason I reread this book, and just so everybody knows what we're talking about, it is called Animal Voices. And here it is. And I have to say that even from the first reading, I would say this is one of the books that has changed my life. Um, so, from the point of view that it's that thing that when you see things, you can't unsee them, and you are changed, you are different.
Yeah.
Um, and I, just the fact that animals are able to communicate telepathically with people is mind blowing.
Yeah, I
That
agree.
was already a big thing, not an unfamiliar concept for me, but it's something that is a great fascination for me. But in your book, what makes this book so amazing is that you are sharing some of the conversations that you and other animal communicators have had with animals. So it's hearing what they have to say that is so profound,
Mm.
because all the more so because people wouldn't credit them with the ability to be so perceptive.
Yeah. Yeah. Can
So
I just
it's,
backtrack a little there? Because
yeah,
it's an important point, I think, where your experience is also my experience that once you open to this idea that animals really can, that we really can communicate with them, it really changes your world. And my experience that I shared in one of the chapters of that book was, I began the book interviewing a lot of different animal communicators. I was just fascinated how it worked. And I really didn't think that it was going to happen to me or that I had this ability, even though they all said, oh, everyone has this ability. He's sort of like, But I remember being in a very meditative state. I was typing and I was, focusing kind of on the book. And some birds came to the window outside my office here. And and I moved in a meditative state, hand on heart, to them. And I heard them. I heard them in my thoughts. I knew they weren't my thoughts because the thoughts were qualitatively different than my own thoughts. And I heard them. And in that moment, it was so natural and so lovely. And it was just, everything was great. And when I came out of that a few minutes later, that's when my heart started beating. I'm like, whoa, what they're saying is real. It's really true. And my whole day was from that point on completely different. My world really did literally completely change at that point. So I think that's good to recognize, huh? That if you just think, oh, that's a nice idea, or maybe other people do that, when you actually have that experience, and this isn't exclusive to animal communication, it's to a lot of other things, that we suddenly feel it in our body and know it, and we know it's real, and then things change. So yeah, yeah.
you know, there's a story in your book. Well, not a story, but a conversation in your book with a fly, and you know, it's a fly.
Right, right.
Conversation with a fly,
Yeah.
and but the thing that really struck me, and this has changed my relationship with flies completely. So what struck me was that this fly talked about how much she enjoyed, or he enjoyed, being a fly,
Mhm.
and how sad it was that people didn't have any appreciation and, thought that flies were revolting, really. I My heart went out to this little fly,
Yeah.
and it's changed my attitude to flies. Now, I have always gone out of my way to help flies that are trapped in rooms by opening windows. But it's so frustrating because you come towards the window and they fly away. And this room that I'm in is a double aspect room and the windows are huge. So what happens is that they fly towards one window. I move towards that window. And as I move towards that window, they fly to the other window. And we have this crazy going forward, backwards and forwards between windows. And all I'm trying to do is help this fly get out. And so I had developed, notice the past tense, I had developed a technique whereby when I see them, I close the curtain so that they can't actually fly to the other side of the room. And then I open the window and I use the curtains to guide them towards the window. Now, that was the past, how I used to get around this silly issue. Since reading your book again, I have found that all I have to do is go to the window and the fly will wait and I will open the window and the
Yeah.
fly will go.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I am not saying that I am communicating with this fly from the point of view that there is no conversation going on, but my mindset has changed and something has changed in the way that I am interacting with flies. And all I can say is my mindset has changed.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite a significant thing. So when I say reading your book has changed my life, it's on a very profound level. Nothing has changed on the outside, but everything has changed on the inside. And I will never look at the fly in the same way that I used to look at before, and it's made a difference. So, and that mindset makes me think of experiences I had with birds long before I even heard about animal communication, where birds in trouble have allowed me to help them.
Mhm.
And I'm now thinking, oh, okay, that's because I have that relationship already set up.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's all about relationship. It's all about our relationship to something. And so, in the beginning scenario with the fly going here and here, and I'm thinking, well, the fly just wants to have fun, right? It's just playing a game with you, right? Back and forth. And then you develop this way of, okay, here's what I want you to do, which in a way, metaphorically speaking, is your mind saying, this is how we want to do it, right? And now it's become natural. So it's like you're in relationship with the fly in a deeper way. You've changed the channel a little bit and the fly just knows, oh, she's going to open the door for me or open the window for me. Right. So it's a different thing. Yeah. It's a different level of relationship. Yeah. And let's just also, I don't know your listenership there, but let's also just um, acknowledge that talking to flies is maybe more intermediate material. When people open to this, it's a little bit easier to think about talking to animals. Oh, my dog, my cat, my horse, that's acceptable. And I think what happens is, at least for me, what happens is, I did initially start talking with my dogs because they were familiar and we had these lovely conversations. And I remember I live in Alaska, so I remember one time I was looking out my back window and I was so excited. It was pretty new to this, and there was a moose. And I wanted to connect with the moose. And the moose just literally went like this and looked at me and was sort of like, can you not see that I'm eating? I'm busy right now, which made me realize, oh, just because we want to talk with something or somebody doesn't mean they necessarily want to talk to us. And then for moose, yeah, I was always interested in, animals that people were maybe afraid of, alligators or snakes or other animals. Insects for sure, are a huge thing. So, I would say, I guess the short of what I'm saying here is, what animal can you communicate with is dependent on how open you are to relationship, because it is all relationship. Yeah.
And that brings me to love, relation
Mm,
and love, because
mm.
what I found so utterly moving was the desire to express, or the the understanding that they have of the human predicament, the compassion that they have for us. I I found that to be so moving because it came through in so many conversations again and again and again.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And again, I would say those often are the animals we live with or the animals that live close to us in proximity. Whereas talking with a wild tiger can be a different situation, and you might not see that same. I mean, I think you do see the same. If you get deep enough, the same kinship connection. You get that. We're relating, we're vibrating, but it may be flavored in a different way. So that's another good way to think of animal communication in general is, we're talking to a specific animal of a specific species. So their language, if you will, their vocabulary is going to be dependent on what animal they are and who they are as a person, personality. It's hard to use the find the exact word for that, but I do think animals do have personalities, if you will. Your dog is different than my dog, and they act differently, and yet they're dog, and so they have that teaching, that larger teaching of dog, and so there's so many different levels here we can talk on, right?
Indeed,
Yeah, yeah.
that's what makes the book so incredibly powerful. I'll tell you something that surprised me.
Mhm.
So I have I work as a past life regressionist. So it's one of the things that I do, one of my
Mhm.
tools. And I have read widely on reincarnation. And there does seem to be this wide belief that human souls always incarnate in human bodies.
Mhm.
Um, I know that the Hindu tradition has a different perspective, but and in my experience, I haven't yet had anyone who regresses to life as anything other than a human being.
Mhm.
And yet, in the book, some animals seem to talk about having had lives as humans.
Mhm.
Tell us about that.
Mhm. Well, yeah, again, I think it begs the question, how open are we to getting beyond our stories about reincarnation, for example, and even in the Hindu tradition, there's some judgment there about, animals are lower lives, lower life souls, and then become human. So it's a very human paradigm, right? Um, I think part of it is I just never believed that at a gut level, even as a child. I just thought we could become all these different things. I don't know where that idea came from. My parents certainly didn't tell me. I don't know. Um, but I think the more animals I talk with about that, the more fluid I am in thinking, yeah, and even time, I mean, some animals are little philosophers, and they're like, well, time is all now, and I'm really this I'm I'm a squirrel here, and I'm also a dog, but I'm also a human, and so they have like alternate lives, which more humans are talking about now. So again, it goes back to the idea of what channel are we on? Are we just believing that reincarnation is a step forward thing? Okay, then within that paradigm, that's what we see. If we're a little more open, then we see different things. And I have talked with a lot of animals who note human lives, and I've talked to some humans who are convinced they were animals as well. So. And we're an animal, the human animal, right? I mean, it's not really that different. It's a different mentality.
But
Yeah.
it makes sense to me because if we are here to have a variety of experiences, then I can see how some souls might choose to experience life from the perspective of different species, because that would complete the perspective, or
Mhm. Yeah.
to have a non-human perspective, I think would be a hugely um, informative experience for the soul. So I can see why that would happen or how that would happen.
Mhm.
So we're not saying that all human souls make that choice and that every animal has been a human at some point.
No,
We're
no.
not saying that, but we're saying, but what I found interesting was that it's a possibility. And I
Possibility.
that
Yeah.
that's quite an interesting thing. Okay, so here's the the big question. Well, one of the many big questions. Um, so you have the ability to communicate, and you've I must say that you've had wonderful conversations with Teddy.
Mhm.
Um, so Teddy being my dog, for those who are unaware, who are you actually talking to? Are you talking to Teddy, my dog, who is currently having had a shower earlier due to rolling in things and wearing a bathrobe, lying on the floor and looking extremely cute? Are you talking to him, or are you talking to another version of him? Because cute and fluffy and the philosopher voice that came through just
Mhm.
don't seem to match.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
What's
it's a
going on?
great question. Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the more that I've been doing this for over 20 years. So I think the more that I do it, I become more fluid. And sometimes I'm saying to people, look, this is higher self Teddy talking, or this is doggy Teddy talking, and there's levels in between too, I think. And it's just, to me, it's not that different than talking to a human, right? I mean, you and I talk differently when we're off camera and we might joke and stuff. And we can get into subjects that are very deep, just like we do with other friends and other people. And sometimes we can channel things, right? We're not even calling it channeling, but sometimes deep wisdom comes through us when we're focused in a certain way. So the answer is, I think all of the above. We're talking to all of the above, who's ever appropriate for that particular question or the message that has to come through, that needs to come through. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does. So how, I guess the next question that begs to be asked is how conscious, how aware are animals of their higher self? Now, I know that for many human beings, there is no awareness at all. And then for many human beings, there is. And perhaps that number is growing. I hope that
Yeah.
number is growing.
Fingers crossed.
Um, so
Yeah.
so some of us have an awareness that there's more to us than the bodies in which through which we express and live our lives. What about animals? What do you feel? Do you feel that they are more aware than us, or is it a mix?
I wouldn't say more. I wouldn't say less. I would say it's a mix. And I would say it's very similar. Sometimes I talk to an animal and right away their philosopher self will come on. And it's just so interesting. I love those talks, right? Because you really get to the meat of it. And then other times there will be animals who I just say, well, he's just a doggy dog. He's just being a doggy dog. I had a dog like that, a black lab. It was just a doggy dog. And that's all he thought about, having fun, eating, running, chasing, that's kind of it. Now, I think this is my additional question. I think, how deep could I get? Is it me who's just seeing doggy dog? Is that the channel that's so loud that that's all I'm seeing? Is it possible to get deeper? My guess is yes. We probably all can, if we combine our energies and kind of deepen, maybe we would get to that doggy dog's higher self or larger, more expansive self. I don't know. Again, what needs to come through in the moment is kind of what is expressed. Yeah. Yeah.
When you the first conversation you had with Teddy, it's very, very clear that doggy Teddy was in on the conversation
Yeah.
because the way he looked at me when we finished, I I can't say I have ever experienced that. It was so unique. Um, he held my gaze for the longest time.
Yeah.
And there was I'm absolutely certain that the words "now you know" were on my mind, not from me, but from him.
Mm, mm,
There
mm,
was this real "now you know."
mhm.
And so we left the room because I went to share what had happened with my partner. And I gave Teddy a cuddle. And again, his eyes locked into mine. And I reckon that gaze lasted about 10 minutes.
Wow.
That was exceptional. My partner said, "Oh, something's happened."
Mhm.
So I am certain that in that conversation, the doggy side of him was very aligned with his higher self
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
and the effect later obviously manifested itself too. So something happened there that was very special. Another thing that you talk about in the book, which is was kind of a
Well, can I
revelation.
just interrupt one
Yes.
sec to go on that for a minute? Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to say, I think it's also when that happens, when something like that happens, it's also because the humans do it. It's also because you were pulling, there was an alignment of sorts. I mean, I don't remember specifically, but when there is that alignment and that connection between human and animal or human and human, whatever it is, um, yeah, something happens, something opens in us and something changes. So yeah,
Yeah,
we need
absolutely.
to see that it's us too, and I just also want to comment, sometimes the doggy dog self is there as well as the higher self, as well as the philosopher self, as well as the, cosmological self, so all of those channels or levels are available to us. And it's how open are we to receive that and to integrate that, huh? And to connect with that. Yeah, and I think there's some animal species, are really good at that. They're really good at pulling in so many different levels that we could totally learn from. Humans we've evolved to be kind of, we're kind of linear, rational, da, 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 right? So this idea of becoming more fluid is a little bit new to some people. Yeah.
Well, yes, and that brings me because you're talking about different species being better at this kind of thing. And that brings me to the next question, because there was something that I found to be a complete revelation. And that is the idea that there are some species who are here for a purpose that is
Hmm.
to do with helping us in the evolution of our consciousness. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's, you know, I think a very kind of almost glib way of putting it, but it's the best way I can put it just at this moment. So tell us about that, because the polar bears, when I read the chapter on the polar bears, I just, well, I had to read it again.
I love I have a special relationship with the polar bears and went on to write another book called Dreaming with Polar Bears, in which that's really a deepening. And let me just backtrack a little bit to say, some animals come with us into our lives for very personal reasons of evolution. We're helping them, they're helping us. Usually it's both ways, right? And you're right. I think there are also species that come in with an overall, I don't want to say agenda, but this is their directive. This is their desire to help in a certain way. Certainly polar bears. I feel whales. I think I'm working with whales right now, and I think whales really, especially during this specific time, are really helping with. Elevating and expanding our consciousness and are very much right there with us with that. So yeah, different species have different gifts they bring to the planet. It's not always about helping humans evolve. Sometimes it's about helping the Gaia, the Earth herself, evolve. Sometimes it's about, bringing evolution to another species. So, but it's all related. And yeah, I think there are, again, are we working with the specific personal animal or the species level? And sometimes those are interwoven, interwoven. Yeah, yeah. So there's a fluidity about that as well. Mm.
I was struck by the beauty of our world when I became conscious of what you were saying. That, I mean, at one level, I always appreciated the gifts that every species brings.
Mm. Mm.
But when I was reading about it at this level of energy and consciousness, and it just, the beauty of it just really, really struck me.
Mm.
And it made me, well, it just moved me beyond anything that I could possibly explain in a cohesive way,
Mm.
because it's just a feeling that, wow, um divine intelligence, that's what I was struck by, the divine
Yeah.
intelligence.
Yeah.
And how that, I've written a book yet, that I haven't yet published. It's called The Raising of Teddy.
Mm.
And it came to me one day, it just arrived in my head. And with it was the phrase one species.
Mm.
And I think that was the beginning of me understanding that there is no distinction really between us and animals, that we are one species.
Mm.
And so, of course, we're different, but we are
Mhm.
one species. And I think reading your book brought that understanding into such a deep level that, yeah, of course, I had a glimpse of it. It's why I wrote the book.
Mhm.
But now I've got another understanding of what that means. And it's so, so beautiful. So we're talking about the beautiful side of it, but you also address the more difficult aspects of that animals have to deal. And in particular, the the two that struck me were the what animals who are being used as research
Mm. That's a
animals
tough
had to
one.
say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also the prey predator relationship.
Yeah.
Those two those two were amazing. Tell us about the lab animals, because I found some of the things they said quite surprising.
Yeah. Well, let's just adjust because I think the predator prey is a little easier, just as a stepping stone there, which is I think a lot of animals have a larger view of um, this is a dance. It's a predator prey dance. It's taking in and letting go, and there's this um, reciprocation of energy, taking in energy of the bear takes in the salmon and then the bear dies and then becomes something else. So there's this ties into the reincarnation thing, really. There's this give and take thing. The lab one, that's a harder one. That was a hard one for me to write too, but I was really interested in that shadow side because what does it mean to hold a mouse in captivity and kind of, torture it really is what some of what happens to not only mice, dogs, cats, monkeys, a lot of animals. That's a really rough
Mm.
one. And I think my perspective now, I can't remember exactly what I wrote in the book because that was like what, 25? That was a quarter century ago I wrote that book. It was a long time ago. What I perceive now, and I think it's probably in alignment with that, is that and the humans who do that too, that's a toll on a human life as well. So there's something deep that is being worked out or worked on a soul level, you know? And there is I mean, and I think it depends on the individual and, sometimes there is a sacrifice involved and a learning of what it means to go through that. And it's hard for me to speak about that because I'm not in that situation. So all I can do is tell you what I've heard and what I've felt and experienced, which is that it's experience, and we might judge it as really horrible and awful. And it's not to say that it isn't, but it's also, there's other sides of it. There's other sides of the soul's progression and what's going on. And we don't know the full story often. Sometimes we're very quick to judge. We're very quick to, that's a story, right? But there's layers. There's layers to
What I
situations. Yes.
also to be very moving in that chapter is how some of the animals were talking about the how it's not the physical
Yeah.
discomfort and pain and torture that they experience. Some of them have a sense of nobility in the intention behind what they're experiencing,
Yeah.
and it helps them to bear it. But the thing that really hurt them was to be treated as though they were nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. As a thing instead of a
and
living being.
and that
Yeah.
comes to the intensive farming practices too, where
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
battery
Yeah. Across the
and
board.
the dairy cows that are just kept and treated as though.
Yeah.
That broke my heart reading that, because
Yeah.
although I already felt it and knew it, to hear it, it's it really it really got to me,
Yeah.
to hear them say what I already instinctively knew. And it made me think about um, the tradition amongst the North American tribes, where they would kill the animal, but they would honor it
Mhm.
and give thanks to it.
Yeah.
And they didn't see it as nothing. They saw it as something, and they weren't
That's
killing for
everything.
pleasure, and they
Yeah.
weren't killing needlessly. There was an understanding that reminded me of what the animals themselves were saying about the prey predator relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not like they were complaining about the fact that they're food. um that's not the issue, the fact that they're being killed. It's the way they're being treated that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
really.
It all goes back to relationship, doesn't it? I mean, and sometimes those lab animals, they're the bodhisattvas that are helping the humans have the experience of waking up to relationship, to not treating an animal as a thing, but as a living being, we're all the same essence. We're all the same essence, right? So, yeah. Yeah.
This book is, I think, the book one of the books that I would urge everyone to read, um, because there's there's a lot of funny sides too, wonderful funny stories, uplifting stories. It's just so moving on so many levels.
Yeah.
And so I want to remind everyone that the book we are discussing is called Animal Voices. Before we go, Dawn, you wrote this book, as you said, 25 years ago. In that time, is there anything that you feel has changed as you've learned more? Um, or is there something new that has come through to you?
Well, just on a personal level, I would say it's certainly been a deepening and a widening. Like this book was mainly personal animals, right? One-on-one. And we did talk about species a little bit and things like that. And I have gone on to work more with species, but also animal spirits, spirit of polar bear, spirit of whale, and really kind of just expand in different, if you will, channels, right? You know, just playing with the radio and finding the different channels and the different ways, you know, of connecting. And I think that is directly related to who we are, how open we can be, you know. So it's an evolution, it's a personal evolution. And I'll also say, I think that as a species, as a human species, we're also opening to this. You know, 25 years ago, I had a really hard time talking my publisher into doing this book. It was just too weird, too, you know, too niche. And now people are a lot more accepting about animal communication. There's a lot more animal communicators out there who are doing the work, and we're open to a lot of other things as well. So I think we are evolving, we are expanding, we're loosening up, you know, a little bit. Our paradigm, it's becoming a little less rigid, and we're opening. So yeah, all of the above, right?
One last question that nearly slipped my mind. Um, Tell us about oversouls. This is a concept that will be new to many people. We can get our heads around, you know, the higher self, but what is the oversoul?
Was I speaking that in terms of this the spirit of like of polar bears, for example?
Yes.
So it's kind of like, you know, how we have individual souls, if you will, or a higher self, which may entail not only our physical self, but other selves, alternate selves. That's a kind of an expansion on that concept. So oversoul, or the spirit of, let's say again, polar bears, is more kind of this, you think of it as the soul of the species, you know, the archetype. Why did they come in? What's their directive? What's their plan? What are they about? You know, so it's that kind of concept, a higher self just for a species level. Does that make sense? That's probably the easiest way to explain it. Yeah.
It's good because I know that that will be something that might come as a bit of a surprise, as a concept. But I
Mm.
really love that concept, because again, it's reminding us that we're all connected,
Yeah.
and it's the idea that each species has an energy that they bring into the world,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
There you
and
go.
that and that's how I see the oversoul, is the that kind of signature energy.
Signature energy is a good way to say it. Yeah. Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah.
And I love that idea. So, well, thank you for coming back to talk about your absolutely magical book. I'll be
Oh,
putting
thank you.
it,
Thank you. Pleasure.
I'll,
Pleasure talking with you again.
I'll be putting a link to it in the description box. And so your website, for those who are now wanting to rush out to make an appointment, um, what is your website?
It's animalvoices.net.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
I will be putting a link to that in the description box as well. Well,
very
thank you
good. Thank
again,
you.
Dawn.
Thank you, Anna.
And thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.